He called me sweetheart in front of 40 officers. The room laughed, that careful, polite kind of laughter men use when they think the danger has passed. To them, I was a retired pilot dragged in to fill a quota, a token woman with a medal and a story. I smiled once, not for humor, but for recognition. The voice belonged to the brother of a man who had died calling my name through static and smoke. So when the Admiral asked for my call sign, I gave it to him. Reaper 0. The sound cut through the air like rotor blades, and for a moment even the ventilation stopped humming. My name carried ghosts, and the men in that room knew exactly whose. My name is Elara Quinn, former naval combat aviator, age 47. That was the moment the past stood up and saluted. Winter in Norfolk always feels like the ocean is holding its breath. Every morning, I'd wipe condensation off the helmet sitting on my kitchen table, an old ritual, the last thing that still obeyed me. Silence was never peace. In war, silence meant you'd lost the signal. After the missions ended, my husband left before the thaw. He said he couldn't live competing with the sky. He was right. I loved the air more than the ground. The divorce papers sat on the counter until the ink faded. My mother still sent letters from Maine. Her last one read, "You fly well, Elara, but you've forgotten how to land." Then came the email. Special Operations Joint Training Program, Coronado Naval Base. The subject line blinked like a flare in fog. I'd promised never to return, but the quiet was killing me faster than war ever did. I packed light, slipped my father's ring into my flight jacket. Before boarding, I scanned the command roster and froze. Admiral Callan Hayes, the same name from the report of a mission that ended with his brother's last breath. Outside, the Pacific wind screamed through the hangar. They say time heals. It doesn't. It just waits for your return. But in the Aleutians, nothing ever thaws. Not the ice, not the memories. I was 33 the night the storm over the Bering swallowed everything that dared to move. The radar died first, then the horizon. Wind screamed past 120 knots. The tower's voice fractured through the static. Abort, Commander Quinn. Visibility 0. If we wait for clear skies, I told them, we'll only bring home bodies. And I pushed the throttle forward. Lieutenant Elara Quinn sat beside me, the only one reckless enough to fly blind into a blizzard. The manual called missions like this non-recoverable. The manual had never met me. We skimmed so low the skids nearly brushed the ice. The only thing we could trust was the moon's reflection on the snow, because the sky lies, but the earth doesn't. Tracer fire shattered the dark. One round tore through the rear hull, another took out half the hydraulics. I locked the stick between my knees, shoulders shaking, boots braced against the pedals. Then movement. Shadows waving from a crater in the white. SEALs. The team we'd come for. We dropped hard. No instruments, no guidance, just instinct and the scream of wind. When the hatch opened, a man stumbled forward, blood frozen on his jaw. "You came," he rasped. "Always," I said. His name, I learned later, was Lieutenant Michael Hayes. We brought every man home. Barely. On the return flight, one engine exploded. We landed running on a single turbine, coasting through smoke and prayer. 3 months later, word came. Michael Hayes was dead. Another crash. Another storm. This one under his brother's command. They filed my report under a codename, Operation Silent Meridian. Pilot Reaper 0. When I asked why, my CO said, "Because you flew through hell and brought back the dead." Since then, every time someone whispered that name, something in me flinched. Survival doesn't feel like victory. San Diego was nothing like the Bering. Sunlight cut through the bay like glass. On the SEAL base wall, a slogan read, "Only the brave return." I smiled, half truth, half ache. I had returned, but bravery had nothing to do with it. The door opened. Admiral Callan Hayes entered, and the room shifted like air before a storm. When he spoke, the room went still. "This is Commander Elara Quinn," he said flatly. "She'll advise on aviation logistics for joint operations." Then Admiral Callan Hayes turned away, as if my name already belonged to history. During the first session, he leaned back in his chair, smirking across the table. "Maybe we'll let our lady pilot handle the turbulence section," he said. "She probably knows it better than we do." Laughter rolled through the room like surf on metal. I wrote one line in my notebook: "Don't react. Wait for the moment." Later, outside the hangar, a young officer caught up to me. "They don't mean harm, ma'am," she said softly. "It's just the way it is." Lieutenant Aria Moore, her badge read. "All nerves and promise." "That's exactly how harm begins," I told her. She looked down, shoulders folding inward. I saw my younger self reflected in that silence, the version of me who hadn't yet learned how to bleed quietly. That evening, while reviewing flight rosters, I froze. Falcon Unit 6. The same SEAL team I'd pulled from the ice 14 years ago. The next morning, in the officers' lounge, Callan told a story as if it were a bar joke. Once a pilot screwed up so bad in the Bering storm the SEALs had to dig themselves out, he said. The room erupted. I turned away before anyone noticed the tremor in my hand. He didn't know the pilot he mocked was standing 10 feet behind him. Not yet. At dusk, I stood on the pier watching the Pacific crash against the hulls. Some storms hit your aircraft. Some hit your name. Monday. 800 hours. The briefing room gleamed glass, steel, and arrogance. 42 officers. 1 admiral. Before I began, Callan interrupted. "Before we go further, tell me something, sweetheart. What's your call sign?" Laughter spread like shrapnel. I met every eye. "Reaper 0. The projector clicked off. A cup hit the floor. Silence devoured the room. Callan's face went white. "You wanted the call sign, Admiral," I said quietly. "Now you've got it." Commander Vic broke the stillness. "Sir, she's the pilot from Operation Silent Meridian. That should qualify me to discuss turbulence." By noon, whispers filled the base. "She's the Reaper. She saved his brother." That afternoon, Callan's aide delivered a note. "Report to the Admiral. EO 900 tomorrow." As I left the briefing room, Lieutenant Aria Moore caught up to me breathless. "Ma'am," she said, voice low. I checked the Silent Meridian file. "It's under Admiral Hayes's name." She hesitated. "He lost his brother that week. He doesn't hate the Reaper for being deadly. He hates the name for reminding him who the storm let live." His office smelled of salt varnish and guilt. "Quite the show yesterday," he said without looking up. It wasn't a show, I replied. It was an answer. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "My brother died because a pilot didn't have your luck." I met his eyes. "Then stop punishing the next one for surviving." That afternoon, I reviewed archived flight reports. His signature appeared again and again. "Pilot requested abort denied." My stomach turned. His brother's death hadn't been fate. It had been his decision. That evening, Captain Mara Keene called from Alaska. "Michael Hayes said your name before he blacked out," she said quietly. "You were his last sentence." I sat for a long time after the call ended. Some echoes don't fade, they wait. That night, Aria found me again outside the hangar. "People are divided," she said. "Some respect you, some don't." "Good," I told her. "Let them talk." "Are you angry? Anger needs fuel," I said. "I'm running on something colder." Before she left, she whispered, "Rumor says he tried to reassign your file." "He can't bury a storm," I said. "It's already hit." Hours later, a message blinked on my screen. "You shouldn't have said Reaper 0. Some ghosts don't like being called." The moon caught my reflection in the glass. The storm wasn't over. It had just changed shape. The base slept under a skin of fog lights trembling against wet concrete. In the records room, I sat alone among metal cabinets and the low hum of vents. File 204 Mission Kachemak Gulf Commander Callan Hayes. The report read, "Weather warnings acknowledged. Continued as planned. Beneath it, an erased line still marked the page pilot requested abort. Commander overruled. His brother hadn't died in a storm. He'd died in a decision. If you think the storm's over, it isn't. Hit subscribe, you'll want to be here when Elara opens that door. I turned. Ma'am, Lieutenant Aria Moore stood in the doorway, eyes wide. What are you doing here? Looking for the truth. If they find you, they'll end you. Then let them. She hesitated, lifted her phone, and snapped a photo of the page. If you fall, I'll make sure this doesn't disappear. By morning, I was summoned by base security. A cold-eyed officer leaned forward across the metal table. You accessed restricted data without clearance. I accessed my own history. He smirked. Then you know it never belonged to you. It hit me then. This wasn't just Callan Hayes' sin. It was an entire system built to bury ghosts. That night my phone rang. Stop digging. Elara Callan's voice rasped through static. Some storms aren't meant to be cleared. And some men aren't meant to stay gods, I said before the line went dead. I reached for the small box in my pocket and slipped my father's silver ring back on. Precision is respect, he used to say. Tonight, precision meant naming the truth. When I returned to my office after midnight, the drawer was empty. Every trace of File 204 was gone except for a single note. You shouldn't have come this far, Reaper. For the first time since the Aleutian storm, the cold I felt wasn't from weather. It came from the truth itself. 2 days later, I sat in the holding room, temporary suspension pending investigation. The air smelled of paper and metal. The door opened. Admiral Callan Hayes entered, his shadow smaller than his name. You found the file, he said quietly. You deleted it. I protected what's left of this unit. No, I said. You protected your pride. He met my eyes. Do you think you're the only one who hears ghosts at night? No, I said. But I'm the only one who answers them. He exhaled, slid a small USB across the table. Play this before you destroy me. Static filled the screen. Then Michael Hayes' voice. Request abort. Callan's voice followed, negative, continue as planned. Silence, then a whisper fading. Tell my brother. The pilot did everything right. Tears blurred my vision. Callan hadn't kept the recording to hide guilt. He'd kept it because he couldn't bear the mercy in his brother's last words. Later, Mara called from Alaska. You found it, didn't you? The truth. No, I said softly. The forgiveness. What I'd uncovered wasn't Callan Hayes' crime, it was his wound. When I wrote my final report, I paused at the section labeled Recommendations. The cursor blinked, waiting for judgment. I could demand punishment or offer a lesson. My father's words came back quiet and steady. Flying isn't about avoiding storms. It's about staying level until they pass. I typed the line slowly. Recommend reassignment to leadership ethics instruction. Minutes after I sent it, a message flashed back from command. Reaper 0, report to Washington. Your presence is required at the hearing. I read the name again. Reaper 0. For the first time, it didn't sting. It didn't mean death anymore. It meant survival. Outside, helicopters roared over the Coronado sky, their shadows gliding across the runway like ghosts that finally had somewhere to go. Lieutenant Aria Moore met me at the tarmac. So what happens now? I fastened my flight helmet, eyes on the horizon. Now, I said, we fly into a different kind of storm. The sunset caught my visor, turning it pale blue, the same hue as the Aleutian ice, where everything began. By morning, I was in Washington, D.C. The air bit like cold steel, crisp with early autumn. Inside the Joint Naval Command hearing room, the fluorescent light cut across the long oak table, bleaching every face into symmetry. I sat in the witness chair. The nameplate before me read, Commander Elara Quinn, Reaper 0. Across from me sat Admiral Callan Hayes, motionless, hollow-eyed. The silence pressed heavier than judgment itself. Commander Quinn, the board representative, said, "Please state your findings." I opened the folder. My voice didn't tremble. Each page turned like a blade drawn slow. Radar data was altered. Safety warnings ignored. The pilot requested abort. I looked up. That order was denied. No one spoke. 2 men died, I said. One because of the storm, the other because of pride. Both deserve truth. A chair scraped. Callan stood. "She's right," he said quietly. "I overruled that abort call. My brother was one of them. I've been punishing the sky ever since." His voice faltered. "And her." I met his eyes. "Leadership without accountability," he whispered, "kills trust faster than any storm." A stunned hush lingered after I spoke. "I don't recommend removal," I said. "I recommend reassignment." Gasps rippled around the table. "He doesn't need punishment," I continued. "He needs to teach what failure looks like so no one repeats it." 20 minutes later, the verdict arrived. Admiral Callan Hayes demoted. Commander Elara Quinn appointed Director Joint Special Operations Flight Training. No applause followed. Only silence, the kind that carries respect. He waited in the corridor, uniform creased expression stripped of rank. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "Yes," I replied. "I did. Someone had to teach the storm how to end." He nodded once. 2 soldiers, once adversaries bound by ghosts, walked into the light, heading in opposite directions. A year later, the air over Coronado Base shimmered with salt and sunlight. Rows of new recruits filled the grandstand for the first graduation of the Leadership Under Fire program. I sat near the back. No uniform this time, just a navy blazer and the quiet of someone who'd already fought her last war. On stage, Callan Hayes stepped to the podium. His hair had grayed at the temples, his voice calmer, steadier. "When I was your age," he began, "I thought command meant shouting louder." He paused. "Then I met someone who led through silence." He looked toward me. "She didn't need to scream to be heard. Her name is Commander Elara Quinn. You know her as Reaper Zero." But what she truly reaped was understanding. Applause began softly, then built until the hall rose to its feet. For once, it didn't sound hollow. It wasn't for the legend. It was for the lesson. After the ceremony, Callan approached with a sealed envelope. Inside was a faded letter. "To whoever saved me that night, if I die tomorrow, tell my brother I saw heaven once." It was made of ice and rotor light. Signed, Michael Hayes. Tears blurred the ink. "He forgave you first," I whispered. Callan met my eyes. "And you." I stopped being angry. I said, "The day I understood why you were." We didn't shake hands. We didn't need to. Forgiveness hung between us, invisible and weightless, like the air that keeps a helicopter from falling. As I walked off the field, Lieutenant Aria Moore jogged up, sunlight glinting off her new insignia. "Ma'am, I got promoted. They said your report changed command training." "Good," I said, smiling. "Now teach them to listen before they lead." Overhead, a squadron of helicopters tore through the blue, slicing the sunlight into ribbons of gold. 3 years later, Washington, D.C. rested beneath a cool amber sky. The marble of the monuments shimmered like old memory, polished, solemn, unyielding. I had been retired for some time when the letter arrived from the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum's Silent Heroes of the Skies, honoring legacy flights. The hall glowed beneath the vast glass dome, the air alive with quiet reverence. Suspended above the stage was my helicopter Reaper Zero, restored immaculate, gleaming under soft gold light. Its rotors stretched wide like wings caught mid-flight, reflecting light across the polished floor. Beneath it, etched in brass, were the words, "Reaper Zero, unknown hero of the Aleutian rescue." The curator called my name, but I barely heard it. My eyes stayed fixed on the aircraft, the same machine that once screamed through ice and tracer fire. Time had turned its scars into shine, its violence into stillness. "Commander Quinn," a soft voice asked behind me. A young woman stood there clutching a worn leather journal to her chest. "I'm Emily Hayes. My father, Admiral Callan Hayes, wanted me to give you this." The journal felt warm despite the museum's chill. On the last page in Callan's uneven handwriting were the words she taught me to land with grace. "Tell her the storm finally cleared." I smiled, the kind that comes only when grief softens into peace. "He finally flew by faith," I whispered. Emily hesitated, then added, "He requested the next helicopter model be named after your call sign. The Navy approved it, RZ-01. I looked up through the glass ceiling. A new helicopter swept across the DC sky, sunlight spilling like liquid gold. "They called me Reaper Zero," I murmured. "But all I ever wanted was to bring people home." Above me, Reaper Zero caught the dying light, no longer steel gray, but the color of peace. Sometimes forgiveness isn't a destination, it's a long flight home. If you've walked through storms of your own, tell me what you'd have done in my place. Would you have grounded the truth or flown it through? Leave your thoughts below, I read them all. And if my story moved something in you, subscribe before you go. I'll be waiting in the next chapter where peace doesn't mean silence. It means learning how to fly again without fear.